Good evening, Judith,
Good evening, Sonya.
and welcome to Nashville.
Oh, that's right. I'm just not very far from you at all right now.
I know it feels weird for you to be so close.
Yes, I am. I am coming to you podcasting from what am I in? I think I'm in a Renaissance hotel. A nice green background.
I know that green looks lovely.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to the Coach's Cup, folks. I am Sonya Green from Sonya Green Coaching.
And I am Judith Fender, one of the coaches for the No BS weight loss program.
And we tonight are talking about stressors versus stress.
What? Tell me more, Sonya. Tell me more. I have not heard any of that this weekend.
No, not at all. It's funny. So I came up with this topic a couple of weeks ago, I guess close to a month ago, when I was on vacation. And even though we've talked a lot about Burnout, the book by the Nagoski sisters, I had not read it in its entirety. I had read
right.
different things, and I still haven't read it in its entirety. Full disclosure. But I started it when I was on vacation, and I was struck by this idea that they set up in the intro, really, about stressors versus stress. And it, like I told you when we were pre-gaming, it's not that anything we're going to say today is new or groundbreaking. But I think this is really yet another angle to look at our lives and look at the things we can control, which is stress, versus the things that we'll never control, which are the stressors in our lives.
And just so that we give our listeners an accurate account of what we're talking about. So a stressor is a fact, a circumstance.
Yes.
It is neutral.
Yes.
Ladies, gentlemen.
Yeah.
I wonder if we do have some male listeners.
Yeah, I feel like we probably do.
We probably got some husbands in the car.
But examples of stressors, when I think about it, I think of a medical diagnosis. That is a stressor. A situation at work. That is a stressor. Or a person. Yeah, just work in general. Yeah.
Your thoughts about work.
Your thoughts about work. Exactly. Getting down to the granular. A political situation. This has felt like a pretty heavy time in some ways over the weekend. But stressors are merely circumstances or facts, as you said. They're just a part of life, and they're always going to be around in some form or another, right?
I mean, we can't, until we die, there will be stressors and stress.
Yeah.
Because the stress would be getting back to the granular, our thoughts about the things in our world that create the feelings that affect us.
Yeah. And, when we get caught up in the circumstances, it's never, actually, I said that wrong. When we get caught up in our thoughts, it's never the circumstance that is the issue. It's never work. It's never the medical diagnosis. It's never a political situation or a personal expectation or, so on and on and on. It's never that. It's always our thought about it.
Right. And you and I both know as seasoned coaches that people are going to argue for their pain. Yeah. They're going to believe that it is work.
Yes.
That is the stress.
Yes.
That if only this, then that.
Yeah.
The circumstance has to change. And you and I know that it's our thoughts about the circumstance. That's the only thing that we have control over. And that it's the thoughts that create the feelings, and the feelings that have us behaving, acting the way we do.
So on the last podcast, you asked me not to ask you any more pointed questions. But
I did. I'm feeling very grounded, just so you know. I'm also tired.
Okay. So as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, you're right. We do always have clients who argue for their pain. And we sometimes argue for our pain.
Absolutely.
Don't think, dear listeners, that just because we're seasoned clients that we never have moments where we argue for our pain too. What is it, do you think, that makes us keep, we do have to keep correcting on that path, because there is part of us that always kind of, not always, but that will argue for our pain.
Control, right? I think the desire for control of a situation, trying to control the circumstance versus trying to control our thoughts about the circumstance.
Yeah.
And it's probably, I don't know, I'm going out on a limb here because this is not well thought out, but I'm willing to go there on this podcast. That, somewhere in life, when we were learning cause and effect, or learning our thinking processes and the way things magically happened, if we cried, mom would come and feed us, or we would get something. And making connections, and somewhere in life, as life changed, we had to unlearn that and see that we're always going to have circumstances. We're always going to be crying, and that what is in our control is how we perceive that. I hope I made a point there. Ask me a question now.
I think it's interesting too. And that really is the argument to move away from arguing for our pain to move into arguing for thought work, because as we acknowledge that our stressors will always be there, that circumstances will always be there. We don't have maybe a parent to turn to or something like that. It's thought work that gives us that comfort, right? That builds our resilience, so that rather than having to give in to the thoughts, the stress, we can have an answer that, no, I do have control. I don't have control over the thing, but I do have control over my thought about it. And look how powerful that control is.
Right. One version of the story is disempowering.
Yes.
And the other version of the story can be empowering, depending on how, when you take control, take authority of your thinking.
Yeah. I think too, with things I have felt over the last several days, especially, it's important to acknowledge that even though I understood that it was my thought that was making me feel the way I was feeling, I still needed to sit in that thought and process it. Because I think the other temptation is to just get rid of it, replace it. Gloss it over. Yes. And recently, over something completely different, but just something else that's gone on in my life in the last couple of weeks, I've caught myself And this has to do with a family member and a medical diagnosis. I've caught myself saying, I don't have the time to think about that right now. I'll make time to come back to that later. And, that builds up. You cannot do that. And so that's another reason that I think this topic has been timely for me, because my temptation is to think that I have to have a special time where I set everything aside and focus on it and process it, and then I can move on. Let's keep it neat and tidy. And that's not how life works either.
It is not. So what I guess I'm curious. So in the moment when you have that thought, but I'll come back and I don't have time to work on that. I'll work on that later, I think is what you said. So,
well, I think I don't have time to process it. Like in the moment, I feel like I'm either handling another situation or I am, whatever it is, I'm convinced that I don't have time to deal with that feeling, with that emotion, with that thought as it presents itself. So I need to tuck it away, and I'm going to bring it out later when I have time to deal with it.
And that's the story, and you're never really bringing it out and dealing with it, because I do think there is some value. I do think that you can acknowledge the thought. Like, of course I'm thinking this. It makes sense because we've gotten this we've heard these sentences, and here's what I can do. I'm going to put some time on my calendar, and brain, thank you. It's going to come up. You're going to offer me all these wonderful thoughts, and I'm going to redirect you. And just remember that we're going to fully unload this on 4:00 on what's today? Sunday.
And that's
Monday.
what I don't do is I don't put time in my calendar. I just keep pushing it forward, which is a habit.
Normal. And it's normal. Like, because who wants to address the things?
Yeah.
Oh, I've got this handled. I can do this. I understand. I know what's going on here.
But you know what happens? That stressor stays, and my thoughts create stress about it. And then another stressor comes along, and I don't have time for that one either. So I allow my thoughts to just sit, and we stack those up. And before we know it, we have allowed multiple layers of stress, yes, to create a situation. I don't know, different people handle those things differently, but you have to pay the piper. No matter who you are. If you're not dealing with your stress, if you're not dealing with your thoughts, they will deal with you.
Exactly. It's gonna come out one way or another, and it's going to be physiological.
Yes.
Problems.
Yeah.
High blood pressure. I mean, here we go.
Yeah. All kinds of things. Getting angry,
insomnia
on someone else.
Right.
Not sleeping, like you said. Yeah. All kinds of physiological, neurological headaches. Some people have headaches because of it.
Anxiety, right? Because you have built up your thinking around work or people or scenarios, and that anxiety is a stress.
Yeah.
A physiological response, putting your body in fight, flight, freeze mode. All the hormones are coming out, which, leading to burnout and compassion fatigue and all of those forms of stress, right? Because
you're physical fatigue. All of those. So I mean, like I said, I don't want to. I know that a lot of this is very basic. It's something that we all know, but it just seemed like a good time for me to remind myself that stressors are always there, And I do have to manage my thoughts around them if I want to create resilience.
And your strategy for managing your thoughts includes, in the moments, acknowledging,
Mm-hmm.
redirecting,
Mm-hmm.
and being intentional about putting it on the calendar, hopefully in that day of. But
And even
journaling.
yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Even interrogating why I don't think I can deal with it in the moment, because that's also a thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not the only one who has that thought. I know I'm not, because I hear clients who have that thought too. But interrogating what it is about that makes me think I can't handle it in the moment. And again, it goes back to control. Is it weakness to deal with, to feel a certain way or to show a certain feeling?
Well, right. It's an avoidant behavior to, because why we do anything is to avoid or create a feeling.
Yeah.
So avoiding stress is because and it would make sense if we're not managing our mind, that we could potentially tell ourselves this story and we don't want to visit it because it's so unpleasant, because when we do visit it, we just keep piling on more and more.
Yeah.
Versus trying to help, pull the story apart. Like you're talking about interrogating.
Yeah. All right. So any last things you want to leave our listeners with when it comes to stressors versus stress?
Thinking you don't have time is an error. Because if you don't make time, it will result in showing up in your body in a physiological way, and encouraging you to, ask yourself, and where am I putting stress on myself? Is it from, am I anticipating a stress? Am I putting it on me because I'm thinking I'm late to work or I should be doing better? Is it, the types of stress in that area?
Yeah. I think so many times if you can just bring it down to the simplest form, it's fear that makes us avoid these feelings, these thoughts. It's fear of something.
Right. Because we're activated in that stress response.
Yes.
Which comes from the thinking, and we're having the cortisol and the adrenaline creating that fear.
Because it's the Nagoski sisters, they talk about being chased by the lion or being chased by whatever, something. And we don't have those kinds of responses today, but we still have plenty of fears.
Exactly. And I don't know where I heard this. And to me, it just really resonates when I think about the brain, that it lives inside of a black box and its only access to the world is through the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the skin.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
And so it tells stories all day long to try and explain on a physiological, what it's encountering
in the world. Yeah.
It's like a little, like a virtual box, just trying to figure out. There you go.
Yeah.
Deep stuff here on a Sunday night.
Love that. No, I love it. All right. Well, folks, if you are looking for coaching, if you have stress that you want to manage better, if you are trying to liberate yourself from stress, you can find more about my coaching at sonyagreencoaching.com, or at Sonya, SONYA_Green Coaching on Instagram.
And if you would like to work with me, I do coach exclusively for the No BS weight loss program.
You can also find us at the Coach's Cup podcast on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, and we would love to hear from you. What are some of your stress thoughts, and what are the stressors that have brought on, that have made you think those thoughts? Also, we would love to have a review of the podcast. So if you haven't reviewed the podcast, then please go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcast and just give us a quick review. If it's a 4 or 5 star, if you're not crazy about us, then no need to review us. We'll be fine.
If you're not crazy about us, you're not listening.
There you go. I like that. All right. Well, we'll see you next week, folks.
Okay. Bye, y'all.